Absolutely, this is the decade of AI.
Right.
And we have seen that AI has got the transformational potential not only from a enterprise standpoint but also from a societal aspect.
Hello and welcome to a whole new episode of Engati CX. If you like our content, you can subscribe to the Engati channel below and you can tap on the bell icon to get notified when a new video is out. I'm Drishti, your host for the day, and today we have an AI expert joining us on the show. But before we begin, allow me to introduce you to the magic of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code digital CX platform, available across 14 channels with 35,000 bots created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by INC, Tech World, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 400,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest, Rahul Bhuman is the head of AI in business and strategy at Tech Mahindra. He is brilliant in identifying, sourcing, and executing a range of strategic and organic initiatives to achieve medium to long term growth goals. He has been recognized by AI Daily and featured for his contribution on how AI helps business strategies. He has been the member on AI Program Advisory Board at the UCSC Silicon Valley Extension and has been the advisor to Garvard Center of Corporate Innovation. Right now, his focus is on how emerging technologies such as AI, blockchain, cybersecurity, and IoT can be used as an additional resource to achieve these goals. So, welcome to the show, Rahul. We are really happy to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
The pleasure is ours. So before we hear from Rahul, remember to subscribe to our channel and you can get access to all the exclusive content. So the first question that I have for you, Rahul, is that we have seen an increase in the employment of AI by 270% in the last 4 years, according to the statistics. So what do you think triggered this change?
Yeah, so if you look at AI from a context standpoint, right? This is not a new technology. This technology has been around from the mid 20th century. Has its ups and downs, what we call AI winters and AI summers.
Right.
But in general, if you look at the technology transformation itself, some of the advancements in technology that have happened in the last 15 to 20 years essentially has caused what we are seeing today in terms of the pickup in activity within artificial intelligence. So let's step back a little bit, right? So the decade of 1990s, has been a significant transformation in terms of using the internet within a business ecosystem. And then we saw a decade of almost 10 years of mobility. We saw the 3G expansion, the 4G expansion, and the ability to get the handsets and the ability to make compute available on almost like a supercomputer available on a palm of a hand. So you got the mobility. And then if you look at the decade of 2010, it was the decade of cloud infrastructure. You have infinite amount of infrastructure, in a way to speak, available for you to work on your areas. So the last 10 to 15 years, or maybe a little bit more, the ubiquity of the internet, the availability of the mobile networks and the sensors, and then the availability of the cloud infrastructure essentially gave two or three things to make AI become what it is today. One is availability of a lot of data. You must be hearing various statistics. It's almost like we're doubling the amount of data every 2 years. Basically, the data that we have generated in the whole of humankind. And then you have laptops and the computers, which are essentially more than supercomputers about 2 decades ago. Sorry, I had a call there. 2 decades ago, and then now the computer essentially is giving an infinite amount of computational power for you to work on this data.
Right.
And lastly, there's been a very good advancement of AI models as well in the last 10 years, especially the Turing Prize. The last Turing Prize that that was given to a trio of individuals who was working on neural networks. So the data, the compute, and the advancement in AI is essentially what triggered broadly this wave of artificial intelligence. But that doesn't mean that it creates jobs, right? There's a lot of activity has been happening in AI in research, but enterprise digital transformation essentially took advantage of this AI, which brought this technology at the core of many of the industries itself.
Right.
About 4 to 5 years ago, when the CEO of Google came and said Google is now an AI first company, and we have seen Google Brain going and beating the Go game in China, proved that advancements in the research are moving more into the realm of enterprises. And people are taking advantage of it. There are a lot of use cases in this space. With the technology available, with infrastructure available, it's the need for people to solve these use cases using this technology. At this stage, we are not autonomous in nature. Many of the times when we think of AI, we think of a capability which is autonomous in nature, where there is no human intervention. But we are in the very, very early stages where a lot of human intervention is needed. And these are some of the reasons why I think AI has the jobs for AI has picked up pace.
That's insightful, actually. Yeah, the whole journey is. It's like we have been through that, but yeah, in the last 10 years, I guess that has been a huge boost to these technologies that have come in.
That's right.
So, was there any particular reason why embracing AI was a challenge in the past?
Well, I mean, there were multiple reasons. I think one of the bigger reasons was the expectation of what AI will do was a little bit more broader in nature. There was almost this thinking of AI being a general intelligence, and folks were looking out for ability for these machines to kind of work like how humans were performing. And there have always been gaps in meeting those expectations.
Definitely.
So that's one of the challenges. Once you're seeing gaps in meeting the expectations, the depth of this technology to allow it to work in an enterprise ecosystem kind of fails. The second reason why we have seen is also the lack of infrastructure. You needed this large compute ecosystems, essentially supercomputers, and which were also in the realm of research, not as much as in enterprise ecosystems, right? And the data was not as much available. And if there is one thing that we take away from AI, it's all about data. While there is some new research happening in terms of how we can use technology on limited amount of data, we are not there yet. It's the more data, the better it is. So I think some of these reasons really didn't allow enterprises to take advantage of this technology, but then that gave us the new wave in the last 5 to 10 years, what we're seeing today, which is essentially taking care of looking at the technology that has been developed in the last 20, 30 years and then reapplying it to the data that is getting generated on the new infrastructure that we have today. Either it's the compute, supercompute CPUs or the GPUs, right?
That's true. So, is it because there were no certain financial barriers that made organizations not go ahead with embracing technologies like AI, or it was just the infrastructure part? So, I guess infrastructure would have been costlier than which is today. Okay.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I mean, it had both financial and commercial barriers, of course, but it also had the barriers of maturity in terms of certain use cases. For example, Engati, you were talking about conversational AI. Why is conversational AI has become pretty big only in the last 5 years, while natural language processing as a technology, as a part of the AI technology, has been around for the last 30, 40 years, if not more, right? It's really the ability for people, the enterprise reasons why they need to go and engage with customers through this omni-channel perspective, and they're connected and they're everywhere. And you had enough data to actually build a conversational AI on top of this, and they can sit on any cloud today. Yeah. So some of these reasons why you're seeing a lot more AI engagement within an enterprise, but also becoming commercially viable.
So, suppose after understanding the basics of AI, how do you think students can advance their learning? Like, will hands-on workshops or live projects based on AI enhance their learning?
Yeah. So apart from my day job, as you know, I also teach at University of California at Santa Cruz, Silicon Valley Extension, right? And I teach the business of AI program. While I teach this program more towards the managerial students, essentially looking at how this technology is impacting the business strategy,
Hmm.
and also if they are deploying AI within their enterprises, how do they need to look at in terms of a lot of gaps that we're finding today in terms of the bias or diversity, transparency, and all those areas. That said, when you say students, right? I mean, I would consider students as two different buckets. You know, one is folks who are technical, hands-on coders, technical engineers, and then you have non-technical managers who are on the strategy or the line of business functions, right?
Right.
If you look at the students in the technology aspects, predominantly, I would say AI is a mix of three different variants, very broadly speaking. One, students need to have a core math expertise. All of AI, if you kind of look under the hood, there is a lot of math behind. Either it is a linear algebra, either it is differential equations, either it's calculus, there's a lot of probability, there is a lot of statistics. So clearly there is a need for students to kind of go back and look at what they have learned, or maybe if they're in the college, spend time and efforts in getting the fundamentals of some of this math in place. If you look at that as one big section, then the other section I would say is someone has to be very good in programming. That's mostly the computer science realm.
Hmm.
And today, there are enough programming languages and scripting languages that folks can use. Either it's Python or R or Java or C++ that they could leverage to build these models. And the third and the most important thing I feel is if someone has to, or want to become the top in this space, there has to be a flavor of domain, of industry expertise. If you're looking at data, if you're looking at gaining insights from a data that you're looking at, you kind of need to know what is this data telling you
Right.
as a machine learning expert. Is it a telecom data? Is it a banking data? If so, what is it that you're gaining out of this particular information? So broadly, I would say these three different areas are where the students may have to spend some time, and I think predominantly it'll be mathematics and computer science. Of course, a flavor of domain as an icing is needed. Again, when coming back to your question, these days when I speak to machine learning engineers or AI or data scientists, professionals. Of course, there are a good set of people who are amazing in terms of how they are looking at the space, but there are also a lot of folks who are wanting to get into this area, but not having spent enough in reskilling themselves.
Hmm.
Sometimes the reskilling is happening. A significant amount of reskilling is happening more by theory, reading blogs and reading books. There is a significant amount of reskilling happening by watching YouTube videos or watching self-learning videos, which is fine. But that'll only give them foundational aspects of it. So if someone who doesn't come from this background and want to get in this background, it's a must to have a hands-on expertise. It's a must to really solve industry problems and actually work on projects using real data. And these days, it's not very difficult to do, right? There are enough training. Some of the top training institutes out there who are making people to kind of get into more of an hands-on
Hmm.
experience, but also a lot of Kaggle kind of websites, which allows folks to learn from real-world problems. So if you look at that as one aspect of technical learning, then if you look at the non-technical learning, right? Again, you need to look at a bunch of things. How do you look at an AI project? What kind of skills you need to look at an AI project? How do you budget for a project like this? Once you have AI in your ecosystem, how do you need to re-engineer your own business process? What are the challenges in AI when it comes to production? Are you looking at the bias? Are you looking at the transparency and the explainability? How are the regulators playing into this realm? Right. So there is a whole set of aspects beyond technology that a line of business manager has to at least have a flavor in terms of the outcomes and ability for AI to generate value in an enterprise. And those kinds of line of business managers, would probably end up taking, like the course I teach, which is the Business of AI course that is become fairly available for non-technical managers. Yeah.
Right, right. So hands-on things would help, but there is also a side where non-technical people can at least understand about what AI is and get the flavor of that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a must for both technical and non-technical. The way I'm looking at AI, someone was telling me very early when electricity was invented, every company has to, used to have a person called chief electricity officer. Essentially, that person's job was to figure out how to use electricity in repurposing their own processes. We are at the stage today where we are seeing chief AI officers. It's a very very early stage, but AI is almost like electricity or an internet, in almost like a general purpose technology, which is essentially going to be pervasive. And if you are going to move from this realm to the realm of where AI becomes more pervasive, then you will see that people who are using this kind of technology need to have a sense of what this is. So
Okay.
so it's not necessarily the technical realm. It could be the users, it could be the business managers. They need to all have an understanding of what we are getting into.
Yeah, I heard one one speech or something where Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, he was just saying that um, from the generation which is coming in, at least they should be knowing some amount of coding to understand what the process would be. Not like reinventing the wheel, but at least they have a knowledge of programming, which helps them understand the complex processes that would go on. So I guess now people should maybe start doing that as well.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you on this. There was a joke that was going on, unfortunately, in the pandemic times, which was saying what is essentially causing your digital transformation. And there was a checkbox that said COVID-19. There is some truth to this, right? What we have seen in terms of transforming an enterprise more digitally in the last 5-6 years has essentially picked up pace. And digital transformation means technology, it's computers. And we are going to be getting into the realm of citizen programmers, where folks need to have a sense of what the space is. Yeah, I mean, I do agree with what the Microsoft CEO is saying.
So, how important is it to understand the concept of AI tool mapping, infrastructures, frameworks, and how can we incorporate this in the mindset of students beginning their careers with AI?
Yeah. I think so. One is there is a fundamental shift in AI, but more specifically machine learning and deep learning. AI is such a large word, and
Right.
and folks do kind of get a little bit overwhelmed of what AI means, because it means a lot of things to a lot of people. But when it comes to specific to machine learning and deep learning, the way I see it is it's actually a fundamental, a paradigm shift in how we program. Uh, Essentially, when we went to school and we were taught how to program, we were programming by using rules. We were telling explicitly to a system on how it needs to make a particular decision. But today, we don't want to code those rules, right? We want to make sure that the data allows those rules to be extracted. And that's what is machine learning, in a way to speak, right? How do we extract rules from the data? So there is a paradigm shift in terms of how the programming itself is going to have a little bit of a pivot into the near future. So students need to kind of get a sense of what they're getting into. It's very important. But again, the good part is there is a lot of technology, especially from the major cloud providers, right? All the 4 or 5 cloud providers have built a lot of technology within machine learning and deep learning. And from a builders of technology, you may kind of put them into two different clusters, right? On one cluster, you could see folks who are building AI and machine learning libraries, right? These are the folks who are really good in the foundational math skills. They're very good in programming, and they're actually going and creating the technology, which is foundational to building applications on top of it. So these are the folks who are like creating platforms, or these are the folks who are creating the deep learning and the machine learning libraries, which is a smaller subset, right? And then you have a set of technocrats or engineers who are leveraging technology to build applications, right? And in that side of things is where your question is more relevant. Over there, I kind of call them more of an applied AI engineers, because you're not necessarily building the libraries from ground up. You are leveraging that is already out there, either via APIs or microservices, or you are using some platforms to use libraries to build certain models, for example, right? So there, it's very important for students to get a landscape view of all the platforms and infrastructure that is out there. Because if you look at, end of the day, you are wanting to work for an enterprise. So if you look at an enterprise IT ecosystem or an enterprise infrastructure ecosystem, you're either seeing a GCP or an AWS or a Microsoft or an IBM or an Oracle Cloud, for example. And if the enterprises have a certain preference to certain infrastructure, so essentially the engineers will have to be working on the particular infrastructure platform. So many of these cloud platforms have certain tools that they have built. For example, if you look at Amazon, there is a transcribe. If you look at or a recognition, there are so many APIs that are available for computer vision or natural language processing. If it's Microsoft, you have certain aspects on the Microsoft cognitive services. If you look at the Google, you have GCP, and then you have IBM, you have Watson APIs, right? So you may want to look at some of those native libraries and APIs available in that infrastructure that will make the life of a machine learning engineer much easier and much faster. But apart from that, there is also still AI is a realm of open source technologies. If you look at the Keras or the Python libraries, or if you look at the TensorFlows, it's very much open source and they're infrastructure agnostic. So the student or the individual or the engineer must know that open source technologies. But beyond that, I think the next generation tools, around automation learning, is another area where we are seeing a lot of traction. Essentially, how do you optimize a lot of hyperparameter optimization, which is where most of the time goes in the data scientist work. So how do you look at that space, and how do you look at automation learning tools like the H2O.ai or many others in the markets, and take advantage of automating some of the data science work. Right. And also, one of the things that you may want to take if you want to step into the shoes of enterprises, they're looking at the Gartner quadrants or the Forrester charts and saying, hey, this is where the technology is on the higher end. So I would say students, they can also search on these things and say, what are the analysts are saying? If the analysts are saying that these are the top tools, because the technology has become so spread out, and you wouldn't know which tool to start with. And I would definitely kind of say, okay, look at the Gartner, look at the IDC, look at the Forrester, and see what are the top tools that they're saying, and maybe get into that particular tool in terms of training.
Yeah, that would actually help. At least somebody who would want to go ahead, not with research or but with enterprises, then yeah, that would be a good reference to go ahead. What is the AI transformation playbook, and what level that can be efficiently utilized, and what are the most important things that are covered in that book?
So when you say transformation, there are a couple of things. One is how do you bring in AI into an enterprise is broadly the theme that we are looking at, right?
Mm.
There are two ways to look at this. On one side, it's a core execution strategy, right? In terms of what are the projects that you are looking at to pilot to begin with, if the company is coming up in a very early stage of leveraging this technology,
Mm.
then how do you prioritize those pilots? Is it the cost? Is it the value? Is it the duration? A mix of those different variables and more. Then you're looking at how do you extract value? I mean, it's not just building technology, but how do you kind of using this technology to work on your business process itself, so it takes advantage of this technology, and then going beyond, how do you train your own employees and workforce to kind of take advantage of this technology for other top priority use cases, and then how do you kind of start looking at an AI first thinking
Mm.
where it's not necessarily the business processes running the technology needs. It could also be how technology going to help you transform the business itself, right? So
Right.
there is this whole playbook that you could look at in terms of, from a pilot to the point of becoming an AI first company. But also on the side, on the other side, you also have this what we call maturity
Mm.
model, right? In terms of AI, in terms of understanding what AI is to becoming an expert. I kind of look at this more like an autonomous vehicles. For example, you have an L1 to an L5, where an L5 is a fully autonomous system, but in the process, you're also developing a lot of driver assistance systems, right? Autonomous driver assistance systems. So, for example, if you're driving a car and there is a car in the front, and can it automatically brake? Can it give you a little bit of an indication that there is an obstruction in front of you? So in the process from being aware to being pretty mature in AI, this whole process of 5 or 6 step process of maturity that the enterprises need to take. So they are kind of bringing in the human machine interaction in a more proper way. They're looking at the bias, they're looking at the privacy, they're looking at the data with a more holistic sense. They're looking at explainability. They're looking at re-engineering their own business processes. So overall, I think and as an enterprise, when they're looking at AI to kind of completely transform with the digital transformation as a larger theme, which is where most of the technology is now playing in. Not just from an execution standpoint, but also from a mature cycle in terms of how they become more autonomous in nature as an enterprise itself. I would look at with both those angles.
So, any other thoughts that you would like to leave with our audience?
Well, I mean, yeah, just a couple of things I would want to. I mean, first of all, thanks for having me on this session. It's actually fun speaking with you, Drishti. So I think a couple of things I would say. One is absolutely this is the decade of AI.
Right.
And we have seen that AI has got the transformational potential not only from a enterprise standpoint but also from a societal aspect. The larger countries are looking at AI, to build a competitive advantage. If you look at the TikTok deal between US and China today, it's all boiling down to who's going to own the algorithms,
Right.
that TikTok has, right? So AI has become a competitive advantage. So it's a good place for students and engineers and enterprises to kind of start looking at this technology to take a competitive advantage position. That's one. The second I want to say is AI is still very early in nature. So when someone is wanting to build an AI, ethics is very important. The transparency, the robustness of an algorithm is very important. So bias is very important in data. Privacy, people have to consider. So it's not necessarily just going and working on it, but have a human lens to AI projects. So the outcomes are definitely both the enterprise and also the societal benefits, right? I mean, I would definitely have that as a takeaway for your audience. And also, most importantly, machine learning is if you look at a deterministic system, we build a system and then we put it in a production, and it is giving an outcome unless until something drastically happens, or if it is a bug, it's giving an outcome that what you expect. But with AI, it's very different. So you might have built an AI model and you're running it in a production, but then data changes. So your outcome will also change, right? So how do you continue to monitor your machine learning models in production? And when there is a data drift and which is causing a relapse in the outcomes from your algorithms, how do you continue to monitor them? So you're not really seeing a gap in terms of the decision making that an enterprise takes. So it's very important that while we are building this space, it's also important to monitor machine learning. And last and most important, I think it's all about data. Anyone who's getting into AI, either as a job or an enterprise implementing it, in not more than, at least my experience has been, about 15 to 20% of the time really goes into optimizing machine learning models, but rest 80 to 85% of the time is really going into the data side of things, requirement analysis, and then integrating this model into business process or a larger enterprise application. So when you look at the whole AI project, look at this from the data standpoint to process reengineering, and then plan accordingly when you're budgeting and also timing, to work on this space. So those are some of the things I would kind of leave you with.
Yeah, that's pretty insightful, Rahul. I must say. Thank you so much for giving us your time, and I'm very sure the audience will learn something from the interview and will also enjoy this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me again. Take care.
Yeah. So we'll be back with a new episode with the brand new expert soon. So stay tuned, and we'll see you around for the next one.